Ladies and gentlemen, when you both go silent, most people think the story is over. They think silence means distance, disinterest, or defeat. But silence is rarely empty. Silence is loud. Silence is full of thoughts, questions, pride, fear, and unfinished emotions. When two people stop talking, something powerful begins to happen beneath the surface. Silence between two people rarely begins with wisdom. It usually begins with ego. The moment communication stops, the first reaction is not understanding, but self-protection. Each person turns inward and starts building a personal defense story. The mind says, I was right. The heart says, I was hurt. The heart says, I was hurt. Ego steps in like a shield and says, do not reach out first. It feels like strength, like control, like dignity. You replay the last exchange and highlight the other person's mistakes while minimizing your own tone, your own timing, your own choice of words. Ego is fast, loud, and convincing. Feeds on pride and whispers that whoever speaks first loses power. In those early, silent hours or days, assumptions grow quickly. Without new words coming in, the brain fills the gaps with guesses. You start interpreting their silence as intentional, strategic, or careless. You attach motives without evidence. Ego loves unfinished stories because it gets to write the ending in its own favor. You check your phone, but tell yourself you don't care. You feel the pull to message, but resist it to maintain position. Outwardly, it looks calm, but internally, it is a debate between impulse and image. But ego burns hot and short while reflection moves slower and deeper. After the emotional surge cools, the quiet becomes less about winning and more about understanding. The same scenes replay, but now your role appears in the frame. You begin to hear your own sharpness, notice your own defensiveness. Remember the moments you could have paused but didn't? Reflection does not shout, it asks, what was I really reacting to? Why did that sentence hit me so hard? Was I trying to be understood or trying to be right? The question starts softening the rigid story ego created. With reflection comes emotional nuance. You recognize mixed motives, care mixed with frustration, love mixed with fear, closeness mixed with insecurity. The other person stops being the villain and becomes human again. Reflection widens the lens. It considers their stress, their past wounds, their communication style, their possible misunderstandings. It doesn't excuse everything, but it complicates the picture in a truthful way. The longer the silence continues without distraction, the more honest the inner dialogue becomes. Ego wanted victory, but reflection wants accuracy. Ego wanted distance, but reflection measures cost. Ego pushes you to hold the line, while reflection studies whether the line was drawn in the right place. Distance is a powerful revealer because it removes the daily habits that can disguise true emotional depth. When two people are in constant contact, routines form quickly. Good morning messages, quick updates, shared jokes, small check-ins. These patterns can feel like proof of deep connection, but sometimes they are only proof of consistent access. When distance suddenly appears, access disappears, and what remains is the real measure of attachment. The heart reacts before the mind can explain. You notice how often you reach for the phone without thinking. You feel the gap in your day where their presence used to sit. Emotional depth shows itself through interruption. At first, many people try to act unaffected. They stay busy, scroll more, talk to others, fill the schedule, but emotional truth leaks through behavior. Focus becomes harder. Patience becomes thinner. Patience becomes thinner. Memory becomes selective, replaying the warm moments more than the conflicts. If the bond was shallow, distraction works easily. Out of sight becomes out of mind with surprising speed. But if the bond had roots, distance creates emotional echoes. Ordinary places, songs, routines start carrying reminders. Attachment is revealed, not by dramatic gestures, but by quiet persistence of thought. Distance also exposes emotional dependence versus emotional choice. Dependence says, I need their attention to feel steady. Choice says, I value their presence, but I remain grounded. In separation, dependence produces anxiety spikes and urgency. Choice produces sadness, but also stability. You learn whether the connection was filling a void or sharing a strength. This realization can be uncomfortable because it challenges the story you told yourself about why the relationship mattered. Another truth distance exposes is priority. People make time for what feels essential to them. When communication becomes harder, only genuine motivation keeps effort alive. If someone finds ways to reach across the gap, adjust timing, and lower pride, attachment is active. If effort fades quickly and silence feels convenient, attachment was conditional. Distance removes convenience and leaves only intention. Emotional depth also shows an interpretation. A deeply attached person feels curiosity and concern, wondering how the other is feeling, whether they are okay, what they are thinking. A lightly attached person focuses mainly on personal inconvenience and wounded pride. The emotional lens tells the story. Concern reaches outward while ego looks inward. Over time, distance stops being just physical or conversational and becomes emotional. Measurement showing whether the bond was built on habit, need, admiration, or something steadier and more deliberate, something that continues pulling attention and care even when there is no immediate reward, no instant reply, no reassurance. Just the lingering sense of connection, still asking quietly for space in the mind and time in the heart, while the silence continues to stretch and the feelings continue to reveal more than planned and more than expected and more than easily denied. When the gap keeps widening and the awareness keeps growing, that attachment has a weight, and that weight keeps pressing gently but constantly on the inner world without asking permission and without offering quick relief and without allowing simple dismissal of what is still being felt underneath the surface of the pause and inside the unanswered moment where the bond is being weighed without words and measured without noise and understood without anyone saying it out loud yet and without anyone fully ready to admit what that measurement is beginning to show about how deep it actually goes and how much it is still quietly holding on, even now as the distance remains in place and the signal has not yet returned and the connection is still suspended in that unresolved space where truth keeps forming but has not yet been spoken and is still gathering shape inside the silence and just about to become clearer and clearer and harder to ignore as the space continues to do its work on the heart, and the awareness keeps unfolding without interruption and without final judgment and without any neat conclusion yet, because the feeling is still unfolding and the realization is still in motion and the understanding is still arriving in layers that have not fully settled into words or decisions or actions and are still moving slowly through the quiet space between two people who are not speaking, but are still being revealed by the distance between them and the emotional signal that continues underneath the pause and the separation and the unanswered reach that remains suspended in thought and attention, an unfinished emotional recognition that has not yet reached its full form and is still becoming more visible with every passing moment of continued space and continued awareness, continued internal response to the absence that keeps showing what presence truly meant and keeps uncovering what attachment truly is, while the silence still holds the floor and the inner response is still speaking, even though no message has been sent, and no voice has been heard, and no final move has yet been made, and the emotional truth is still arriving piece by piece inside the growing clarity of the distance itself, and the awareness it keeps creating without stopping and without closing in, without fully resolving what it has begun to show about the real depth involved and the real attachment underneath it, and the real meaning still forming in the quiet where the connection remains emotionally active even while externally paused and still not fully finished being understood as it continues to unfold inside the ongoing experience of separation and the ongoing exposure of what the heart continues to carry in the absence of contact and the presence of distance in the steady, revealing effect that keeps working without announcement and without permission and without a final spoken line. Yet pride has a strange way of disguising delay as strength. When communication breaks and silence settles in, pride steps forward and says, wait, hold your ground. Don't be the one who moves first. It frames hesitation as power and patience as control. You feel the urge to speak, to clarify, to soften the misunderstanding, but pride tightens your posture and tells you that reaching out lowers your value. So you rehearse restraint, you type messages and delete them, you imagine conversations that never get sent. The delay feels intentional, almost strategic, as if time itself will prove your position right. During this delay, emotional noise slowly reduces. The first wave of reaction is usually heat, quick judgments, sharp interpretations, absolute certainty about who caused what. Pride feeds on that heat because it keeps the story simple and keeps you heroic in your own version. But as hours turn into days, intensity cools. Without new conflict data coming in, the mind starts reviewing instead of reacting. You notice tone instead of just words. You remember context instead of only impact. The same moment that felt completely one-sided begins to show multiple angles. Pride still resists, but clarity starts asking better questions. What exactly hurt me there? What did I assume instead of confirm? Was I trying to solve the issue or protect my image? Delay creates space, and space allows detail to surface. You begin separating intention from effect. You consider that being misunderstood and being disrespected are not always the same thing. This is where emotional maturity has a chance to enter, not loudly, but steadily. The interesting shift is that clarity often grows quietly while pride grows tired. Pride needs constant emotional fuel, anger, offense, righteousness. When those emotions settle, pride has less energy to command the whole inner conversation. Clarity, on the other hand, works with calm. It connects patterns across past conversations. It highlights repeated triggers. It shows you your habits in conflict, interrupting, withdrawing, escalating, avoiding. It doesn't rush to verdict. It maps behavior. With growing clarity comes a change in goal. Winning the pause becomes less important than improving the next exchange. You start thinking less about who should speak first and more about how to speak better. The imagined conversation changes tone. It becomes more specific, more accountable, more measured, not softer in truth, but cleaner in delivery. The delay that pride created accidentally gives clarity the workspace it needed. And in that workspace, new understanding keeps forming. New phrasing keeps appearing, new responsibility keeps taking shape, and the next possible words begin lining up differently than before, waiting in a quieter, more deliberate order, without the old urgency and without the earlier need to defend every edge at once, and without the same attachment to being seen as completely right while the fuller picture is still arranging itself inside the pause and still adjusting what it wants to say and how it wants to say it, and what it is no longer interested in proving at any cost, and what it is now more interested in resolving carefully and directly and more honestly than the first reaction ever allowed, and more thoughtfully than pride first permitted when the silence initially began and the delay first took hold and the inner review first started to unfold in the background of the waiting space between impulse and response and between reaction and the clearer message that is still forming and still not fully spoke. Yet, constant presence can make appreciation lazy. When someone is always there, always replying, always available, always consistent, the human mind quickly turns that reliability into a baseline instead of a gift. What was once special becomes expected. Messages feel normal instead of meaningful. Time together feels routine instead of chosen. There is no bad intention in this at first. It is simply how familiarity works. The nervous system relaxes around consistency, and relaxed attention often stops measuring value carefully. You don't study what feels guaranteed. You don't weigh what feels permanent. Absence interrupts that automation. When presence is removed, Contrast appears. The emotional environment changes shape. The small things that barely registered, a check-in, a joke, a supportive sentence, a predictable good night, suddenly become noticeable by their disappearance. The mind starts scanning for what used to be automatic and finds empty space instead. That empty space is informative. It highlights function and feeling. At the same time, you realize not just that they were there, but what their being there was doing for you emotionally, mentally, even physically, in terms of calm and rhythm. Absence also slows perception down. While someone is constantly present, interactions overlap and blur. One moment runs into another. During absence, memory isolates moments and examines them individually. You recall specific gestures, specific phrases, specific acts of patience or effort. Value becomes itemized instead of bundled. Instead of they were around, it becomes they encouraged me that day. They showed up when I was low. They understood that fear. Detail increases worth because detail proves intention. Another shift happens in emotional measurement. Presence lets you judge based on mood. Absence forces you to judge based on impact. Mood changes daily, but impact accumulates. When the person is not currently influencing your mood with fresh behavior, your mind evaluates their longer pattern. Did they add stability? Did they reduce stress?